myself. And when you're done, Andrew, I want you to tell me exactly which sentence is the conclusion. I don't want you to sum anything up for me. I don't want you to
Okay.
summarize things. Yeah, there is going to be a sentence that is always, the conclusion is always in the passage, so to speak. Okay, we don't have to summarize anything.
Okay.
Cool. So go ahead whenever you're
Gotcha.
ready.
So this one, after an area has been hit by a natural disaster, there's often a great demand for plywood for repairing damaged homes. Retailers in the area often raise prices on new shipments of plywood to well above their pre-disaster prices, and some people denounce these retailers for taking advantage of a disaster to make more money on each sheet of plywood they sell. In fact, however, these retailers do not make more money on each sheet of plywood than before the disaster because transporting the plywood into devastated areas is difficult and expensive, and therefore the plywood cost to retailers is higher than it was before the disaster. This one is these retailers do not make more money on each sheet of plywood. That
Nice.
to
Very good.
that's what I did as the conclusion.
Very good. I
They
love it.
tried to get me on the last sentence because of
I love
therefore, but that wasn't it. That one explains that one.
exactly.
So
That's
it,
it.
it
Well
is
done.
okay.
Well done, Andrew. Yes, yes, perfect. You've said everything perfectly. Because I was going to ask you, what's the role of the sentence that comes after the conclusion, right? So, because transporting the plywood into devastated areas is difficult and expensive, and therefore, and so this little guy here is an intermediary conclusion. It's not
And
the main conclusion, right? So be careful with those as well. Like you said,
gotcha.
it's explaining the main conclusion, right? And if this was a role question, because you're going to see a bunch of role of a sentence questions on the LSAT as well. So you need to be good at those as well, right? So when
Okay.
you need an argument, ideally you want to do two things, right? One, you always want to separate the conclusion from premises. You do that normally. And two, also look at what the sentences are doing within an argument, the other sentences as well. Be like, so this explains why that is. That explains this, blah, 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 right? So this is what
Okay.
I mean by breaking down the argument, so to speak. Okay, so
Gotcha.
on harder assumption questions or the ones that come after, 18, between 18 to 25, things will not jump out at you as easily, so to speak, right? So, but that doesn't mean that you should still just go through and negate things. You don't have to do that
Right.
either. I mean, you will have to eliminate sometimes, but when you do elimination, um, it needs to be sort of like an educated elimination, not like from ground zero, just looking at everything and trying to calculate things in your mind. Okay. So
Gotcha.
in this case, now we have an assumption on which the argument depends. So this assumption basically, it applies to both sufficient and necessary. Any type of assumption on the LSAT is essentially bridging the gap between premises and the conclusion, so to speak,
Okay.
right? So that's what your
Mhm.
assumption needs to do. And without that assumption, here's the deal. Without assuming that correct assumption, which one of these five, your conclusion here will just burn. It will not hold true. That's the whole
Gotcha.
point, right? So by essentially coming up with an assumption, you are enforcing the conclusion. That's another way of saying it. You're essentially enforcing the conclusion. You're forcing the conclusion actually, in a sense that
Okay.
you're making that conclusion strong and correct.
Okay.
Okay?
Enforcing.
So exactly, yeah. So that's a word that a phrase that I like to
Yeah.
use. Yeah. So you're enforcing the conclusion in the sense that without assuming that, without having that bridge between the premise and the conclusion, your conclusion is not as strong. It's subject to questioning, so to speak. Okay,
Okay.
so now let's look at what is going on here exactly. So we have these retailers do not make more money on each sheet of plywood than before the disaster.
Yes.
Okay, so how do we go about this? Now, we know there's a high demand for plywood, right? And
After
we
the
also
disaster. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. So that is just background information, so that is not going to be as important. And now here we have retailers in the area often raise prices on shipments of plywood to well above their pre-disaster prices. So we know that retailers, right, raise those
Hmm.
plywood prices. Okay?
Yes.
All right. And so here, let me actually write it down for you because that's a very important premise. So I'm going to put it right here. This practice alone will help you a lot, Andrew, because you're separating the premise from the conclusions. Okay. So
Okay.
what's my main premise here? Main premise here is that retailers will raise prices for plywood to well above their pre-disaster levels. Okay, so can you see this? I'm sorry if this is,
Yeah,
I don't really like this
yeah,
font.
I get it. And I have my notebook too, so
Oh, okay, perfect,
yeah.
perfect. Okay,
That's why I
wonderful.
keep looking down. I don't have my
Wonderful.
phone on me. I'm doing this.
Okay,
So,
okay. All right. So here, let me make this maybe slightly smaller. Green, I don't like green. Let's change this to a little bit darker. Let's make it no, I don't like that. Let's make that red.
okay.
Let's make that red. Okay. So that's premise number one. Okay, let's see, and we have to read very carefully, okay? And soon enough, your brain will do this quicker, but I just need to demonstrate this just so you understand the process. All right. And
Gotcha.
then it says, so we basically have one premise, really, one premise that truly matters here, okay? Andrew, I
Okay.
want you to see that because everything else is essentially fluff. First sentence is a fluff. It just explains to you like what happens, why there's greater demand, blah blah blah. That's not going
Right.
to help me with my assumption, okay? Now, the second sentence is the one is our main premise. And I'm not even going to talk about the fact that people denounce these retailers for, making more money. It does kind of matter, but here, hear me out for a second. Then comes my conclusion here. I'm going to write it down here for you. Can you see? Can you
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Go see
Then
it.
my conclusion says what? These retailers
Don't make more money
do
on each
not
sheet.
make exactly. It's gonna cover that here. One second.
I don't think that's the right answer, anyways. Retailers must pay full amount.
Retailers do not make more money on each sheet of plywood, right? So that's what's going on
Yes.
here. So I need to come up with an assumption that basically allows me to make that jump. Andrew, that's a gap. There's a gap in between the premise and the
Yeah.
assumption. My premise is saying that, hey, retailers will raise prices for plywood to well above their pre-disaster levels, right? So basically, the
Yes.
customers are going to have to pay more, right? Okay.
Yes.
And then the conclusion is like, wait a minute, though. Actually, these retailers do not make more money on each sheet of plywood. So what the hell is going on? Right? I
Yeah.
need to bridge that gap. How can I make sure, by assuming that important assumption, how can I make sure that retailers indeed will not make more money on each sheet of plywood? I need to basically assume that. So I'm going to put it down here.
Okay.
I'm going to say assume this. And Andrew, also remember everything, the correct answer has to be about money. It can't be about anything else. All right.
Right.
It has to be about money. So
Prices and
shipping
money.
costs.
Okay.
Yeah, 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 exactly. So let's actually see if there's any answers that are kind of irrelevant here. Let me see. Du-du-du-du. Yeah, they're mostly about money. Okay, full amount, money, as much plywood to an area. This one, it's not really talking much about
That's
it.
talking about demand, not so much money.
Exactly. Yes, yes, exactly. Retailers of areas. Okay, so here's what I mean by making this sort of an educated guess, kind of,
Mhm.
in your head before looking at the argument, at the answer choices. So ideally, before you look at the answer choices, you kind of want to have to, um, ideally come up with that assumption yourself, right? Ideally.
Yeah.
So in this case, what do you think that could be?
So it's got to be well
It's
because
something
now I
mathematical, so to speak.
yeah. So I know I already whenever I just looked at the answer too. So now I'm
Oh, you
like,
did?
oh well,
Okay.
yeah. I didn't mean to, but yeah.
That's
I mean, I
fine.
see it. I see it down. So, but I was gonna say regardless, you
That's
know.
fine. But I need you to explain it to me, though. I know you have the correct answer.
So the assumption has to be, let's see, going from the prices that they pay the suppliers,
Yes. Yeah,
get charged, and what we the retailers sell it for. There
correct.
has to be, it, it's got to be less than, right? So, um,
Try your best. You got, and
yeah,
let me show you numbers. That's fine. Let me
yeah,
show you numbers. I'm
okay,
going to show you numbers. Okay. So let's do a little math exercise here. So imagine we're
gotcha.
looking at pre-disaster, right? So let me
Mhm.
actually get rid of all this stuff here. So I'm going
Okay,
to say pre-disaster. So I'm going to say that P, and I'm going to say after disaster. Okay. So
yes,
give me some numbers. Imagine a sheet of plywood pre-disaster is like $40,
okay,
right? And um, this is the cost for retailer, by the way. And the customer pays let's say $70, right? Does that make sense?
Gotcha.
Perfect.
Yes.
So that's the cost of retailer, and this is what the customer pays. Okay, so let me put the arrows here. Now, after the disaster, here's where things get interesting because my assumption actually bridges that gap, so to speak. Okay, so what is the money that my retailer makes pre-disaster, Andrew?
Thirty
What's their
dollars.
profit? Exactly. Their
$30.
profit. Yeah, you got it. So here's the deal now, right? So I'm gonna
Yeah.
just put, okay. So now imagine the retailer. You're smiling. I think you get this already. Yes, you
Yeah.
get it.
Let's say their cost went to 50, but now we're charging 90. So now our
There you
profit
go.
is higher
Genius. Absolutely genius. There you go, Andrew. Do you understand what an assumption is now? Like it's such an important part. Like if we don't assume this, Andrew, if we don't
yeah,
assume this, my conclusion dies. It literally just vanishes.
because what they're saying, what the conclusion's saying is that they don't make
Exactly. Yes,
more
you got it.
profit. That's
Yes.
essentially it. So if
Boom.
we have a
Boom.
yeah, okay.
Wonderful. Do you understand? Like, I need you to get it this way in the sense, I don't want you to be looking at the answers and trying to play with them too much because that's going to burn your time on the exam, right? So, this
Okay.
is why I love this test so much, Andrew, because it does make
Yeah.
you smarter too. And eventually you just get quicker and quicker and quicker. You read an argument, you're like, boom, let me analyze, break it down, break it down, break it down. Okay, this is what I think could be wrong with the argument. So, let me find an assumption to bridge that gap so my conclusion is okay.
Okay. So yeah.
I don't
Um
want to move on. If you have questions, please ask. But let me go through the scenario one more time. So imagine if they did this. Now this conclusion burns. Why? Because, hey, retailers do make more money. So I need to
after.
say something here. What do I need to assume? I need to assume that, hold on a second. Okay, if they're raising the price, they have to. They cannot make raise it more than the money in a way to make more profit, right? It has to be
Yes.
30. It has to be 30. Like if I'm increasing if my cost has gone up by $10, my price has to go up by $10 too. And that's what this assumption is saying, because only then this conclusion is correct.
Does that make sense? Yes. So that I understand that, right?
Perfect.
And the
Beauty.
math makes it a lot easier,
Beauty.
but to articulate it like how all the other programs and like I'm more of a hey, let's do it. Let's hence the reason I have pen and paper. Um,
That's
so
okay.
I get what you're saying. So if I I mean, is there any way for me to like learn how to articulate better? Especially when I like what I do, just read
Well,
more or like, you know,
yes, yes, yes. So as Loophole says, I think it's a nice book. It's a really nice
yeah.
book. As it says on the book, what you want to do. And now here, I'm going to show you. This is another thing that we can do for you, Andrew. Even if you
Hmm.
don't sign up for tutoring, I am still going to send you some nice tutorials from the company. These are
Okay.
basically pre-recorded sessions where the tutors explain things, especially specific things in a way that makes good sense. Like it's not like garbage explanation, you know what I mean? So I'll send
Yeah.
you that. And as you watch more of those videos, Andrew, things will make so you will read an argument and you'll just get better at it. So the way you do it is for now, just for now, do not bother reading this stuff.
Okay.
Seriously, I mean it. Do not
Gotcha.
bother reading this stuff. Your goal, your number one objective is read my stimulus and understand what the hell is it's saying and know that there's usually something wrong with it and
Yeah.
find that thing. Andrew, find that thing. Find that gap. Question. Once you read the author's conclusion, be like, ah, you're full of shit. That's the attitude I want you to have.
Always.
Okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Question them.
Exactly.
Okay.
Question them. Be like, no, not really. No, 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 no. I disagree. You know what I mean? Like play these games in your head, and come up with some possible gaps. Now, mind you, Andrew, the first test that I gave you, you got like a 95% on that. You only got one question wrong. So those were level two, level one, level two-ish, level three maybe questions.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're doing
Okay.
great. You're doing absolutely great. It's just these questions that I added specifically for you afterwards, they're
Yeah.
hard. Okay. So which means that predicting them is not easy as the ones before.
Okay.
All right, now let's go through the other answer choices. You don't have to do this obviously on the test day because it's a waste of time. I mean, you will when you eliminate, but You don't have to
Right.
explain to yourself why they're incorrect, so to speak, right? And the
Yeah.
way I'm going to get you to approach it is remember what our premise was, Andrew, and remember what our conclusion was, because we only had one truly important premise and then one conclusion, right? So we're making a jump here that, wait, retailers do not make money, and we need to explain why retailers do not make more money. Okay?
Gotcha.
So go ahead and
Okay.
go through the answer choices. And I kind of want to see how you would.
So, like, whenever I looked at it yesterday, it was, I would go through, okay, so what I'm trying to do is show that, again, the pre-disaster prices are they make more money when the conclusion says they don't. Okay, if the conclusion says they don't, I have to find one of these answers that shows that they don't make more money. So
Yes.
residents of areas affected by natural disaster are often unable to pay the prices. So that's talking about the residents that are unable to pay. That doesn't have
Mm.
anything to do with the retailer. So that is gone
There you
automatically.
go. Absolutely. I love it because we don't really care how well positioned these residents are to make these payments. No one cares
Yeah.
about that. That's not the main point. Okay.
So then I go to number two. Retailers must pay the full amount of any increase in shipping cost. So what they're trying to get me to do in this case is say that there is an increase, which we know there's an increase because it says it. Um, since I can't really, like, whenever I'm taking this, I would have just said, okay, let's hold it. I don't really like it, but there's something about it that's not making me go like the first one. So I would have just kept it there
Okay,
and
that's
I would
fine.
have
But
kept going.
remember also that the fact that retailers must pay the full amount of any increase in shipping costs, how does
Mhm.
that help me? How does that help me enforce my conclusion? If anything, this is actually not a good answer at all because
Okay.
this almost shows me that retailers might lose money or something like that, you know? It's not
Because
really, it's not really, but we can keep it for later. That's fine. We can keep it for later.
so
Keep going.
okay. So no retailer makes enough money on each sheet of plywood sold to absorb for long an increase in shipping costs without raising prices. So this one I would have knocked out because we're not talking about without raising it. Okay. No retailer makes enough money on each sheet of plywood sold to absorb for long an increase in shipping costs without raising prices. Well, it raises the prices. So we already know they're raising the prices. It doesn't
Exactly.
matter.
Yeah, it's what the
So
hell?
like that, yeah, it would have added that and it would have been like,
Big
nope,
BS.
that's gone.
Big BS.
Then I would have kept going. So suppliers of plywood do not transport as much plywood to an area that has been affected. So what they're trying to get me to do is supply and demand, but that's bringing in outside knowledge,
You got it.
and
It's
I
just
know enough
irrelevant.
to not do that. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like
Um,
it just doesn't explain to me why my retailers actually do not make more money. Like I need to
yeah.
find that explanation. I'm dying to do that, right?
So, and then this one, the increase in price charged by retailers for plywood following a natural disaster does not exceed the increase in cost of those retailers, which is basically saying exactly what
Andrew,
they
also
don't make more
remember
money.
this negation here is very important. It says does not exceed, okay? Please
Okay,
read this carefully. There could have been a trap answer. There could have been a trap answer somewhere here that says it does exceed because the LSAT test writers know that your brain is tired.
it's going
You know what I
quick.
mean? If it says it
Okay,
does exceed, then that actually kills my conclusion.
trap. But in this case, so like, not knowing what we're just going over. So
Yeah.
how I would have done it yesterday was negating everything. So I would have said the increase in price charged by retailers for plywood following a natural disaster does exceed the
Aha.
increase in cost,
Yeah.
which then, if I negate it, would have demolished or, it
Correct.
would have
Because the retailers
completely
make more
killed it.
money.
So that way I know that has to be it. And just for good measure,
Beauty.
retailers must not pay the full amount. Well, if they don't pay the full amount, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah. It's
It
like,
doesn't
no.
make any sense.
It doesn't address my main concern here, so to speak, right? Yeah, it must
Yeah.
not pay the full amount and any increase in shipping costs. Then they
So
probably don't have to raise their prices as much. Whatever. It's just
yeah,
it takes me down a convoluted path.
yeah.
But what I
Uh,
really want you to get out of this, Andrew, is again two things. I'm not necessarily just trying to help you with this question. I'm trying to
okay.
help you understand to separate the conclusion from the premises. Be like, what is the premise that matters the most? Sometimes there's more than one. Sometimes there could be three. You know, the background information, blah, blah, blah. Isolate them If needed, write them down for now, okay?
Hmm.
And then put your conclusion down there as well. Create a visual gap between the conclusion and the premise. And then ask yourself, does it make sense for me to go from this limited premise to a broad conclusion? The answer is going to be no 99% of the time. And that is how you're going to get quicker and better on the LSAT because you'll be able to come up with these little predictions. Okay? All
Okay.
right. So this method works on everything. Okay? This is the way to go about the LSAT. So let me show you one more